Welcome back to another episode of A Different Perspective. In this episode, we're going to take it for a different turn than our previous episodes and actually talk about how we struggled to come up with a topic for this episode. And so we kind of landed on the topic of getting out of a creative rut, finding inspiration and motivation for your projects or your creative endeavors.
So funnily enough, because we just couldn't figure out what topic we wanted to discuss, that led us down the rabbit hole to learning a bit about what's called decision paralysis. And often you'll hear about it referred to as decision fatigue as well, though they're very similar. There is a difference where decision paralysis is like you just can't make a decision, and decision fatigue is when you're not able to make the best decision or you start making worse decisions. Today, we're mostly going to be talking about the most extreme version of that just because it's all related and it is more intense. And we've come up with some really fun ways to help you overcome them, which have actually helped us as well.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the best ways that you can kind of get over decision paralysis is narrowing down your focus. On that note, we decided that we'd play a fun game to help us narrow down our options to get us going. And if you stick around to the end of the episode, we're actually going to use this game to come up with our photo challenge for this episode.
So the game we came up with is actually a way to choose random creative topics, and it's literally a hat draw. So we took 3 different hats, and within each hat, we've got 3 major categories. Yours is easier to shake than mine.
Do you hear that? It sounds like success.
Mine sounds a little less like success, a little more like constraint.
Womp womp.
So the 3 major categories that we came up with, and you can come up with more or less if you want to, but we have subject, technique, and constraints. And Kyle's gonna run through those right now to go through the options that we put in the hat.
So first hat is actually the subject, and we're gonna focus on people, architecture, landscape, pets and wildlife, food, or products. And again, like Jean said, feel free to add or subtract anything in this bucket. Hat. This is a hat, not a bucket. Kyle.
And the next category under techniques or settings, we've got fast shutter speed, long exposure, black and white photography, nighttime, daytime, and reflections.
In our last hat, we have the constraints. And our constraints are going to be using only one light, using a natural light, no editing being allowed, breaking one composition rule, using no props, and then our last one is just only being able to use a phone.
And if you do the smartphone only challenge and you draw that card, don't be afraid, because you should, if you've watched our previous episode, already understand the basics of lighting and composition, so there's no excuse for a bad photo.
Yeah, no excuses. Kyle.
And just remember that most of the time, creating more constraint for yourself actually gives you stronger focus and a better intentional result in the end. But that being said, just because you have less hats doesn't mean you actually have less constraints. In fact, sometimes having more hats or choosing 2 subjects or, whatever combination could provide more constraint if you implement it correctly. So for example, you could draw a card that says birds, and you could draw a card that says hats. I don't know why I thought of hats, but we're talking about
hats so much.
Yeah. So I'll just stick with it. But instead of giving yourself the option to shoot a bird or a hat, try to get them both in one frame. That seems like a really odd picture, but it could be cool. I don't know. Yeah, do what you want. Maybe it's a little chick in a hat. I don't know. But as long as you are using the constraints in a way that actually give you less options, that's a really good way to get a little more creative as well.
And then remember too, if you pick a subject like, say, a landscape, and then your setting is in a kitchen or in your house, remember you can get creative with creating a landscape with certain objects, or using like miniature figures to, put certain food elements in to make your landscape. Just get creative with whatever options that you come up with,
All right, so with all of that said, now that your brain is full of creative inspiration, hopefully, we're gonna take a step back to the previous challenge and go through our edit process for that.
All right, guys, for this silhouette photo challenge, I went to one of my favorite buildings in Buffalo, New York, and probably one of my favorite buildings in the entire country. It's now called Hotel Henry. They renovated it, made it into a hotel, but it is just such a unique piece of architecture here in Buffalo. And that's what I wanted to highlight, especially with these peaks that you see up here. I just thought it would make for a really interesting silhouette. So obviously this isn't my silhouette shot, but I just wanted to take a shot and show you guys what it looked like in a normal exposed setting. So started off doing some wider angle horizontal shots, and then ultimately tried some vertical shots here, and was getting pretty happy with it, like this one a lot. But ultimately I landed on this one for my shot. And one of the main reasons was because I was really liking how the sun was almost captured in that lamp right there, that lantern. And also I managed to capture a guy walking his dog there. Really like the shadows that were the long shadows that were being cast from the sun too. So here is the before, and here's the after. So really didn't do too much this shot because I was already very happy with it as is, but I'll go through really quickly for you. Changed the color profile to Adobe Landscape, boosted the contrast, did -14 for the highlights, did the tiniest little S curve here in the tone curves for the white balance, just made it a little bit cooler than what it was shot at. Dropped the saturation down -9. For my color mixer, played around with the saturation of orange and the luminance. Green, changed the saturation a little bit. Cyan, dropped the saturation a little bit. And then also for blue, dropped that saturation too. Added a little bit of clarity and dehaze to it. Added a lot of sharpening, but I masked that, bumped it up to 90. And drop the radius and detail down. For the color noise, that should be 50. And that was my simple edit for this photo challenge.
Alrighty, so for my silhouette picture from this last challenge, I decided to photograph Baby Yoda, of course. And the reason that I wanted to do it is I originally had this idea of a big ol' white background kind of wrapping around him and causing this really interesting silhouette. And it kind of worked, but I actually wasn't as happy with this, and I thought it wasn't quite as unique, especially because you could see the ground color versus the background color, and it wasn't all white. So I decided to kind of mask that by going with RGB. And I mean, you can still see there's a ground and a background, but at least you can't really tell they're two different colors necessarily. So anyway, I just started experimenting with different lighting positions. I had the lights, little aperture MCs directly behind little Baby Yoda. Tried a few different compositions. Got a little lower there, but then I had 3 different sections to the background instead of 2. All these lights were still directly behind it. And then right here, I put them out to the side. I wasn't really liking how they looked, but I liked how it was creating this rim light here on his face. So it was getting a little more dimension to the picture. Then I decided to just go a completely different route, and I put the lights way up above, and I actually opened up the aperture a little bit more. So I got that background a little softer, that seam a little less like harsh, I guess. And then I was able to see more of the rim light around his head and his ears, and I thought that was looking pretty good, but it looked dead because there was no reflection on his eyeball. So I kept experimenting and just changing the composition up a little bit, trying to get rid of this like foreground on the carpet here, which is kind of funny because I just put foam core on the floor. Yeah, and this was getting closer. I liked this one a lot. The framing was nice, but there was still no catch light in the eye. So I added a third light eventually. I think I did a few more shots without that light here. Moved it out a little to the front, but then there was too much green. And this one was just kind of weird looking, too harsh. Yeah, and too much of a rim. It wasn't quite silhouette-y enough. So I decided to try this out. I'm like, oh, now I'm getting that catch light. And again, I didn't like this floor color change. So I decided to kind of mix both of those concepts together. So I have 3 lights total, and this was the final image I came up with right here. So I've got a green light up here, purple up here, and then I just gently, it was a very tricky positioning of the little light, but I had a daylight balanced light, just kind of positioned just close enough to the side of him and dim enough that it wasn't really adding too much of a rim, but just enough to start reflecting off of his eyeball. And this one was okay, but it showed too much color in the ear. Same with this one, but this one was the money. So it's like very silhouetted, but you can see the outlines. You see that highlighted in his eyeball. So that's one I decided to go with. And this isn't edited yet, and I honestly don't really have a lot of plans for editing this. Yeah, I mean, I might switch to Adobe Landscape, but I don't want to bring up too much of the. Yeah, see, now it's bringing up too much in the face, so I'll just keep it as it is. Maybe I'll try some vibrance. Honestly though, I don't think this photo, just the way that it was built, needs any editing, to be honest. I just boosted saturation a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and maybe do a tiny bit of sharpening, but it's a really wide open image anyway, so sharpening it's not gonna do much. In fact, I'm not going to do any sharpening, just do a little masking, just leave it at the default sharpening bits, and that's it. So really it was all just done in shot, not so much of an edit this time, but yeah, that's my submission.
And as we said at the start of this episode, we're actually going to use this game to come up with our next photo challenge. And so for our first one, we're going to use the subject. So I am going to draw one of these subjects out of this hat right now. Just one. Architecture.
All right, so the next category is the techniques hat, and I'm gonna go ahead and draw something out of here randomly. Ah, nice. Simple but effective. Black and white.
And then lastly, we're going to focus on constraints. So I've got my constraints hat. Somebody needs to constrain me from making this sound. Oh, one fell out.
Oh, destiny.
Let's see what it is. It's phone only.
No way.
All right, so once again, our subject for this photo challenge is going to be architecture. It's going to be shot in black and white, and we can only use our phones to capture this photo.
All right, so there you have it. Thank you so much for watching this episode of A Different Perspective. And be sure to get involved with this challenge by following us on Instagram. And you can do this challenge specifically if you want to, or you can draw from your own hat and let us know what you got out of that. But be sure to use the hashtag #ADifferentPerspectiveTV and tag us at adifferentperspective.tv so that we're notified when you post and we can reshare and you'll be featured on the next episode. Other than that, be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon so that you're notified when the next episode comes out and you can be involved in those as well. And go back and check our previous videos so that you can see the other challenges and topics we've discussed so you can get up to speed.
Also, let us know down below in the comments if there's any tips that you have to get out of a creative rut. Anything that would be helpful for the rest of our community to use in their own creative process.
So I guess that'll do it. We'll see you in episode 9, where we do more creative things.